Hello, welcome to RetroSpect Television, where we take a nostalgic look back at American pop culture of the past decades. Today we are going to be taking a look at the way we used to listen to music in the 80s and how it somewhat compares to the newer generation of digital music and MP3 players today. So, if you're down, let's rewind to a time of mixtapes. In the 80s, we had cassette tapes and they were something amazing for their time. If you were into music at the time of cassette tapes, you probably enjoyed them to their fullest. Small and convenient, cassette tapes had a side A and a side B that would hold around an hour of playtime per side. They had 5 control options, which were usually play, stop, eject, rewind and fast forward, which wouldn't let you directly skip tracks or anything like that, but would allow you to quickly wind up the tape on one side to get through the songs. Since you had to fast forward or rewind a tape reel to get to different tracks on the cassette, most people would play one side of the cassette from beginning to end, then flip it over to hear the rest of the album on side B, usually from start to end. Side note: sometimes the album's tracks wouldn't finish out the full length of the cassette's playtime reel either. So artist would leave a huge space of emptiness and then place a song at the very end of the tape reel, which artist called a secret song. A lot of times people would fast forward the cassette to get back to the beginning of side A, while the tape was still playing. That way, they could hear the noise looking for a secret song. Though sometimes people would find the song, without looking for it, and that moment would be something special to them. Speaking of something special when talking about music of the past, let's talk a little bit about track order. One reason why track order used to be so important, to artists and listeners alike, was because we didn't have a track skip button or a playlist of songs to pick and choose from. Today, we listen to whatever song we want, whenever we want with just a few taps of a screen. We can quickly put together a track list on our phone and connect to almost any device through Bluetooth. But during the era of cassettes, since people would tend to pop in a cassette and just listen to a whole side, from beginning to end, we quickly became a generation of song order. A lot of times, even if we didn't like certain songs on albums, we would just let it play through until the next track. Artists would spend more time curating track lists and things like how the songs would end and begin between the tracks and how musically or emotionally tracks would lead into each other. Then some listeners just wanted to hear the band's radio hit and they didn't care about how any tracks were laid out. So record labels also had a cure for the people who only wanted the popular song by their favorite artist. If we wanted to hear just the hit single Believe It or Not, we would buy a cassette that only had enough tape reel in it for one song on side A and one song on side B. They would record the hit single song on each side of the tape and boom, you had the single ready to hear over and over again just by playing and flipping the tape. Also, single cassettes would be used for recording mixtapes perfectly. Ironically, we would buy these cassettes containing the single for $1.99, like they did with single songs when iPods and digital music first came into the public eye. If you remember cassette singles, tell us down in the comments about some of your favorite singles from the 80s. Now let's move on to recording and personal mixtapes. I mean, mixtapes alone could be an entire video series in itself. Not only to artists did track order seem important, but since people would listen to full sides of tapes due to not having any kind of select track option, recording order of those songs seemed very important in making mixtapes as well. Cause we couldn't just skip to the next track, we either had to listen or fast forward and hear that god-awful sound if you were playing the song, whilst fast forwarding. You know, cause you wanted to hear the break in the songs to know when the next track started. Another thing about recording tracks to tapes is that you had to listen to the track during recording, whether it was off the radio or recording from another cassette tape. So a lot of mixtapes would have a song starting with snips of DJs announcing the song, or it would have the recording start after about 10 seconds of the song playing, cause we didn't hit record on time, but at least you had that song until the next time you could record it perfectly. The way to record was pretty awesome and unique in itself. One process was the dual tape deck boombox, which was, in a sense, the 80s version of an MP3 player. Today, it only played radio stations and cassette tapes. We did not have digital music libraries back then. As we compare it to the iPod, the boombox is a very iconic piece of history that came from the 80s and will be remembered like the iPod for its advancement in technology, as well as the collecting of music in listeners' lives. For example, with iPods, we were able to carry multiple artists and their entire discographies on an item the size of a cassette tape. And we got to take that everywhere we went. In the 80s, we only had cassettes that carried around 2 hours of music at a time, therefore we would record mixtapes. On our boombox we would have 2 tape deck slots. The first slot usually was for listening to cassettes, or playing the cassette you were wanting to record from. The second deck was for recording. It was always loaded with a blank tape for recording from the radio when your song came on, or recording from other cassettes. That second cassette deck was where all the magic happened. Using the first tape to record from other cassettes was a solid way to go, since you could start and end the song exactly where you needed to on each tape during recording. Whether you were making a mixtape for a road trip, those walks to school, or for someone you had a crush on, the track order always seemed so important. Any hoots, the 80s was definitely fun and wild times for music collectors. Thank you for joining us today on RetroSpect TV and our quick look back at cassette tapes and the era of mixtapes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more nostalgic memories with RetroSpect Television. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.